Hello and welcome to this slide looking at paper 2. It's a quick little overview of the paper itself, and there'll be other videos for you to watch to kind of give you an idea of what to do for each of the questions. This video will just give you a quick little overview of the different parts of it and how it's made up. So paper 2 is the non-fiction paper. It's worth 50% of your overall GCSE in English language, and it's an hour and 45 minutes. Now for this paper, you'll be given two extracts that are non-fiction, and what they will do is they will be linked by a topic or a theme or a thread. And so what it will be is, like for example, this one here is about children. So this looks at children and their relationships with parents. And so source A looks at it from a very modern perspective, and source B on the right hand side focuses from a Victorian perspective. So we see how two different people view children differently. Now the paper itself will look at different topics. So previous topics that we've had are children, looking at a sport, looking at boats and vehicles, but it could be absolutely anything. So what the examiner will do, will choose something that most people will be familiar with. So it won't be something strange and bizarre, but it will be something that you'll know of, but you obviously we're looking at two different people's perspective on it. Now, okay, now that they're two papers, we need to just look at something particular, because these two texts are going to be written from different perspectives on the same topic. So we need to think about that when we're looking at this paper. So say, for example, the paper was based on fire, and the two articles were from two different people from different times looking at their perspective on fire. So the first one, let's say a modern writer, would be looking at it and probably think about how we use fire every day, and probably be a bit normal to them. So they wouldn't be shocked or surprised about fire. They're probably used to it, you know, having a fireplace, having fire for cooking, and obviously candles and things like that. So for them, probably used to having fire and then working on that basis. Let's think about a caveman. Now, obviously, cavemen can't write, so we're going to be very, very clear that obviously it's not a real situation, but it's to give us the idea of what a different perspective would look like. So what would a caveman's perspective be on fire? Well, their perspective would be kind of like impressed and shocked and amazed because they've never seen fire before. And so we've got two different perspectives. We've got the modern writer who'd be like, yeah, it's fire, whatever. And then you've got the caveman who's like, what is this strange, amazing thing? It's exciting. And so we've got two different perspectives. And so that's what the paper is going to be about, looking at two different perspectives. Now, what we can't say is, right, well, one is an old text, so they're looking at it from an old person's perspective, and one's a modern text, so they're looking at it from a modern perspective. As I've given you that example there, it's about how that person views that fire, that topic. And so obviously a modern reader would be quite used to fire, and an old writer would not be so used to fire in the way that we use it. So you can see that there's a difference in perspective, and that's what this paper is about, the different perspective, how two people see the topic in different ways. And the example we've got here is how two writers view children and children growing up. And so you've got a very modern view in that source A, and you've got a very Victorian view. And we kind of know that Victorians would have treated children differently. As that phrase, a child should be seen and not heard. And so children were very much sort of kept away. And so they were raised separately, and so the parents had limited contact with their child growing up. Modern writers will probably have spent quite a lot of time, and they've been part of that process. And so we can see that the two different perspectives here would look at childhood differently. We've got the modern perspective, which is looking after their children and helping them and seeing their role as developing the child. And then we've got the Victorian perspective that see raising a child as not their job. You know, they're looking to provide for their child, but it's not their job to raise the child. So they would have somebody else to do that. So they'd see governors and teachers being important from that process. Now, the paper itself, there are 4 reading questions. There's a writing section, but we're not going to look at that at the moment. So these 4 questions, they look at the 2 texts. And we're going to go through the different questions. Now, we will go in more detail in other videos, but this at the moment is just to give you an overview, a feel for the paper. What does it feel like? Question 1 is a fairly straightforward question. And the reason it's there is to make sure that you can score some marks. So you should be able to at least get 4 marks from this quite easily. It shows that you've read the text, so you can't just jump in. You've got to make sure that you've read the text carefully and closely. So what you'll be given is you're given a number of statements, and you've got to decide which of those statements are true. And there'll be 4 of those that are true, so you've got to decide, looking at the text, reading the text, and making sure that you have got them right. Now, some of them may be tricky, so they may relate to something that's later on in the text, and you can see here that it gives a specific part of the text that you need to focus on. So you just colour in 4 of the ones that you think are right. Question 2. Now, question 2 is a deceptive one because it says you are going to write a summary of the different activities the boys do in source A and the boy does in source B. The problem is with this question, and we'll look at it later on in another video, is the fact that our view of summary, we often think is it's about putting it all into your own words. You have to rewrite what the text says and put it in your own words. It's not to do that. It's looking at one thing. And here it's the boy and the activities. And so this is a question that's going to check your understanding of both texts. So straight away now for question 2, you're talking about source A and source B. And this is not about the writer's techniques, but this is about what you learn about the boy. So it's really an inference question. So you have to read between the lines. So it's not about the writer. And usually students make the mistake about thinking that this is a question about the writer. So it's really looking at the text. And question 2 is about digging deep and looking under the surface of the text. So what can we take from this idea about what the boys do? Question 3. Now, question 3 is pretty standard for what we do in English a lot of the time. It's very much like your literature question. So you're talking about the language and you're talking about how the writer shows us something. So in particular here, we're looking at how the writer uses language to show the sun and describe the sun. So this is where we're zooming in on language techniques and we're talking about words. So what words and techniques has the writer used to show us his sun, and why have they used those particular words or phrases? Okay, now notice on this that it's about source A, and this question could be in either of the sources. So there'll probably be one source there that the examiner's chosen, which they think is best to talk about in terms of language. And question 4. Now, question 4 is really a combination of all the questions together. And what the examiner is doing is taking you through. Question 1 is making sure that you've read the text. Question 2 is making sure that you've read both texts and you can say something about the topic. Question 3 is a zooming in on the language. Question 4 is kind of a mixture of all those different things. And it's getting you to explain how do these 2 different texts show these 2 different perspectives. So you're looking at what does the writer think or feel about the topic. So what does source A, what does that writer think or feel about the topic? And what words and techniques has he used or she used to show that idea? Comparing it then with the second text. So what does the second writer, how do they show their thoughts and feelings about the topic? Now this video is just an overview. There will be other videos looking at the questions in a bit more detail and focusing more on what to do for each of these questions. But this is just to give you a quick overview of the paper itself. Okay, challenge time now. We've written 8 statements. Some of them are true and some of them are false. Now, based on what we've seen in the video today, I want you to decide which of these are true and which of these are false. So if you just pause the video now and have a go at doing that yourself. Okay, so the answers then. Question number 1, there are 6 questions on the reading section of paper 2. That's false because there are only 4 questions on the reading section. Number 2 is true. Number 3 is false. One text will be a non-fiction text and the other text will be a non-fiction text. They're both non-fiction texts for this paper. It's paper 1 that will have the fiction text in it. Number 4 is correct. Number 5 is correct. Number 6 is false. Question 2 involves summarizing the writer's ideas. That's not correct. The correct way of looking at question 2 is that question 2 involves summarizing the topic, so not the writer's ideas, and that tends to be question 4 on the paper. Now that's the end of that video. Do look out for the other videos exploring the questions in great detail. Thank you.